Ostend is just one continental town that still has trams as a thriving form of public transport. They've been here since 1886, but it was in 1983 that 50 new trams like this one first took to the tracks. One big tram can take up to 150 people, so they carry a total of more than 80,000 passengers a year. And that's a lot of tickets. Do you have a ticket to Middlekirk, please? Thanks. Sharing the road with other traffic tends to hold up the trams, so they often have a separate track to speed up their journey along the 84-kilometre route. The trams run along the coast, linking the port of Ostend with other Belgian seaside towns, and during the tourist season they're really packed. Trams are still in Dover too, but only in the town's Transport Museum. In this video we will look at how the growth of a medium-sized town like Dover influenced the development of its public transport system. Cars have not always been the main form of transport. 100 years ago, people walked to work and to the shops. Dover was a small town, and not many people had a carriage or even a bicycle. Though there were a few privately run horse buses, they were expensive and infrequent. But the town was growing fast. More jobs on the cross-channel ferries, the docks and the railways. Since the early 19th century, Dover had expanded along the valleys leading inland from the harbour, with streets of new houses for the town's workers and for the more prosperous citizens. The local builders were ready to build more streets of houses, but how could they persuade people to live further out from the town? This builder, William Crundle, also happened to be the mayor of the town. In 1895, he persuaded Dover Town Council to build an electric tramway. Dover was the first town in the south of England to have this exciting new form of transport. Electric power itself was new. The town's gasworks had supplied Victorian Dover with light and heat for decades. The newly built electric power station had gleaming modern generators, but was struggling to survive. It had won the contract to light the main streets at night, but so far not many customers were using electricity during the day. So selling power to the trams helped solve the problems of the new power station. A 100 years ago, the Dover trams run by electricity seemed as new and original as the Docklands Light Railway does today. It made its first journey on the 30th of July, 1987, and runs automatically without a driver. By travelling above the congested London streets, it offers a speedy service to large numbers of people, and means that the Dockland area is much more attractive to live in. The first trams in Dover were a great novelty. Everyone wanted a ride. The fare was 1 penny to travel the whole length of the route. The trams started from the edge of town. Joe Harmon, who worked on the trams as a boy, told us,
"This was almost countryside in those days, and there used to be Buckland Farm here, and the tram sheds were built on the site of the old Buckland Farm. And this is a spot where the trams used to leave every morning. At 5:28 was the first tram, and this was the main depot with another one at Maxton, but this was the largest depot, which could hold about 20 trams.
It was a long walk into town, and the trams picked up many passengers on the way. The town hall was a busy stop on the main road leading into the centre of town. Now the trams ran through the busy shopping streets, and by the time they reached the market square, they were packed.
But the trams used to come down through the centre of this market square with the centre poles. They used to have poles in the middle of the road with little islands round them, and the wires used to go either side. And one of the things you had to remember is not to put the pole on the wrong wire, because if you're coming up through the square, you would make contact with one of the centre posts, because the wires used to run either side of the post.
Not all passengers were shoppers. People came down for a stroll along the seafront or listen to the band concert.
This was, of course, the spot where people used to come summertime for band concerts. We used to have a regular series of band concerts, and it was quite a thing to go. And we used to have a spur of the tram track come off near here, and we used to park 3 trams on there to collect the passengers when they came away from the band performance about 9:30 at night. And this was, I well remember waiting for the end of the concert. We used to like to get down there a bit early if we could hear some of the numbers.
The line carried on down the busy street, which then surrounded the harbour, finishing on the quayside, near the pier where the ferries docked. A branch line joined the town centre with a residential area along the main road to Folkestone. These large Victorian houses were already here when the tramway was built. Quick, cheap transport had the desired effect. New rows of houses were built further out of town. The expansion and improvement of Dover at this time had much to do with these 2 men, the Mayor, Sir William Crandall, and Councillor H.J. Barnes. Leader of the town's Conservative Party, Crandall's schemes aroused fierce controversy. This cartoon was published by rival candidates in the 1905 election. Dover Municipal Marionette Show, how it's worked.
We must pull off the Biggin Street job, Bill. Never mind what the ratepayers say. Now then, boys, all together, vote.
Crandall was a very rich man. His fortune was growing from profits on building schemes, and, as his critics pointed out, to the detriment of the townsfolk.
Hang the consequences. Let 'em sink. I can swim.
One of William Crandall's major schemes was to persuade Dover Harbour Board to build a deep water harbour suitable for ocean liners and cargo ships. The government joined in too, with plans for a big naval base. so at the turn of the century it looked likely that Dover would become a big city. But once the harbour was finished, lots of jobs were lost, a situation made worse by the heavy unemployment which hit the country in 1904. In order to help Dover's unemployed, Dover Council created more jobs on the Dover Tramway. The tramway was extended out to a small village near Dover called River. The following year, in 1905, the mayor, councillors and hundreds of citizens rode on specially decorated trams down the new line. The builders weren't slow to take advantage. River soon became an upmarket residential suburb. By now the trams were a way of life. One couple even travelled to their wedding by tram. But in reality the Dover tramways were beginning to run into trouble. With the outbreak of the First World War in 1914, spare parts for the trams were hard to find, and the wires and tracks started to wear out. The fares were too low to pay for repairs, and the system, which had been so up to date 20 years previous, was now in danger of collapse. But something happened here in August 1917 that brought the whole problem of maintenance to a head. A tram was coming down this hill, obviously gaining speed. The driver panicked. He did not work the complicated braking system properly, and the tram careered down the hill. On the bend at the bottom, the driver jumped off, and the tram turned over. 11 passengers were killed, and a further 60 injured. By 1917, the trams also faced a new threat. For several years, motor buses had been running into town from country areas, but they weren't allowed to pick up any passengers along the tram routes. The nearby town of Deal had some of the first experimental motor services. When they started, these buses were noisy and unreliable, but by the First World War, the technical problems had largely been solved. Soon after the war, there was more house building in Dover. The council built new estates of houses to rent on the outskirts of the town, as part of a drive in the 20s to build homes fit for heroes. But it was obvious that with buses you could start a new route without having the enormous expense of building tracks and overhead wires. Fortunately for the trams, a new manager came in to save the day. Places like Birmingham and Hartlepool were re-equipping with big modern trams at this time, so Dover was able to buy their old trams at bargain prices. From 1926, a multicoloured and multi-shaped collection of cast-off trams could be seen rattling around the streets of Dover. With increased fares, the tramways even started paying their way again. But the era of the trams was in actual fact drawing to a close. It was the age of the motor car and the bus. Next to an East Kent bus, the trams looked a thing of the past. One other change influenced the council. So long as they owned the town's power station, they were keen to keep electric trams going as a very useful and profitable customer. But when the national grid took over in 1926, Dover Council gave up generating electricity, and this no longer mattered. In 1934, the East Kent Bus Company made this tempting offer to the council. Let a town to replace your trams, and we'll give you 3/4 of the profit for the next 25 years. The council could hardly refuse. Time had finally run out for Dover Corporation tramways. The last tram ran on the 31st of December, 1936. The old open-top trams were dumped at River, to the delight of the local boys. The trams were later burned. On the 1st of January 1937, the buses took over. The routes were extended to the new roads of private houses. Since 1905, Dover had grown, but it was easier for the buses to grow with it. New estates of council and private houses were built out from the town. And with increasing prosperity, more people were able to buy their own motor car. Today, it's the bus's turn to lose passengers, as owning a car becomes commonplace. Car owners are able to live out in the country villages while working and shopping in the town. But new out-of-town shopping centres are replacing the old shops. Although it's not much fun if you don't have a car. But with the success of the Docklands Light Railway and plans for the super tram of the future, this clean and cheap method of travelling may become commonplace once again.